All right, welcome to the film room. Today, we're diving deep into a really highly anticipated preseason clash going down at SoFi Stadium between the New Orleans Saints and the Los Angeles Rams. Now look, we aren't just going to sit here and talk about those typical surface-level preseason narratives. No way. We're treating this exhibition game for exactly what it is. This fascinating, high-stakes collision of elite 2025 analytical baselines totally veiled by the wild, volatile unknowns of August football. We're going to map out the true tactical battlegrounds, dissect the specific game states, and give you some grounded, strictly data-backed projections. So grab your notebooks, because we're getting right into it.
Here's our scouting report for today. We'll be looking at identity versus preseason reality, heavy surfaces and fits, quarterbacks under pressure, the trench confrontation, game states and pace, and finally, our final verdict.
Okay, let's kick things off with Section 1, Identity versus Preseason Reality.
Before we even start drawing up the X's and O's, we have to talk about the actual environment we're dealing with here. Because honestly, there's a massive tension between the hard data and the reality of preseason ball. You see, on August 20th, these two squads held a joint practice. And if you follow the modern NFL, you know that joint work is essentially the real game for the starters. It gives the coaching staffs this controlled, highly scripted environment to evaluate their first-string guys without the risk of a live game. So that drastically lowers the chance we see established starters under the stadium lights. Heck, the chaos of the preseason is even baked into the schedule itself. If you look at the Saints' camp schedule versus the official NFL schedule, they literally list conflicting kickoff times. But regardless of the exact minute the ball is teed up, the main takeaway is this. The evaluation priorities for this game were heavily shaped by whatever happened on that practice field on the 20th.
So, let's establish our baseline. Plus 0.12. That is the Los Angeles Rams' staggering offensive expected points added, or EPA, per play from their 2025 regular season baseline. Basically, if you're new to the stat, EPA just measures how much a specific play increases a team's actual chances of scoring points. And plus 0.12? That is elite. They also rolled out a 49.6% offensive success rate. It just proves the absolute top-tier caliber of Sean McVay's unit. It's this ruthless, hyper-efficient, multiplicity-based offense. But, and this is a big but, our analytical discipline means we have to separate that scary baseline identity from what we're actually going to see on the field when the starters are wearing baseball caps on the sideline.
Moving on to Section 2, heavy surfaces and fits.
Okay, so the Rams have this incredibly dominant heavy personnel identity. To get specific, they utilized 13 personnel, so that's 1 running back and 3 tight ends on the field at the same time, on a league-high 30.5% of their snaps in 2025. Just to put that into perspective for you, that was more than double the rate of the next closest team in the NFL. And this isn't just Sean McVay being quirky. Using these heavy surfaces allows the offense to completely dictate pre-snap leverage. It's a nightmare for defensive coordinators because it creates the exact same pre-snap picture for a downhill run, a play-action bootleg, a tight end leak, or a condensed route release. It basically forces the defense to make impossible split-second choices.
But here is where the matchup gets fascinating. How do the Saints counter this heavy approach? Well, their 2025 defensive baseline is pretty much elite. New Orleans allowed just 3.97 yards per carry and posted a negative 0.10 defensive rush EPA. That ranked second in the entire league. So this is a seriously formidable defensive front we're talking about. This whole matchup boils down to New Orleans' interior guys and linebackers fitting the run perfectly against Los Angeles' extra gaps. If the Saints can hold their gap integrity, right? If they can force 2nd and 8 situations without having to cheat an extra safety down into the box, they can totally keep the roof on the Rams' play-action game. But if LA starts creating clean edges, the Saints are in trouble. They'll have to choose between committing bodies to stop the run or protecting those deep intermediate seams, and that is a lose-lose situation.
All right, Section 3, quarterbacks under pressure.
If you're looking for the clearest path to blowing this game wide open, it's the Rams' defense. Last season, they generated an absolutely ferocious 38% defensive pressure rate, which was good for 5th in the NFL. And you cannot talk about that pressure without bringing up Kobe Turner. The guy is a wrecking ball. His on-field pressure rate was an elite 43.2%. When he stepped off the field, that number plummeted down to 27.2%. He is the engine of that pass rush.
And the way Chris Shula runs this defensive scheme is just designed to slowly suffocate you. When opposing offenses faced a 3rd and 7 or longer against this Rams defense, they converted a measly 17.7% of the time. Think about that. That's the 3rd lowest mark in the league. They do this by throwing the kitchen sink at you, simulated pressures, complex line stunts, deep disguises, and dime personnel packages, which they ran at a huge 32.4% rate. It creates an absolute nightmare scenario for any quarterback trying to diagnose where the rush is actually coming from before the snap.
And that pressure scheme, that's what defines the quarterback battle today. Look, if Matthew Stafford somehow plays a series, his superpower is his pre-snap mastery. He can identify leverage, use motion to sniff out man or zone, and get the ball out of his hands instantly. But let's be real, the rotational reality of the preseason means we are almost certainly watching reserves like Stetson Bennett, rookie Ty Simpson, or Zach Wilson running the show. And you simply cannot copy and paste Stafford's elite EPA onto those guys. The true test for these backups is going to be processing speed. Can they execute simple, defined half-field throws? Can they swallow their pride and take the check down when the simulated pressure gets home? And most importantly, can they avoid holding onto the football and taking those drive-killing, momentum-crushing sacks?
Let's look at Section 4, the trench confrontation.
Make no mistake, preseason football is won and lost in the trenches, period. And that's largely because offensive line communication degrades so incredibly fast when you start subbing in second and third string guys. The Rams defense was a brick wall on early downs last year, allowing only a 31.8% rush success rate on first down. On the flip side, the Saints offense was a bit more modest, putting up 3.7 yards per carry and 5.0 yards per play. The absolute key here is that the Saints' rushing attack cannot afford any backward drift against the Rams' defensive line stunts. If a rotational offensive lineman blows an assignment and lets a free rusher through for a negative play on first down, it's basically game over for that drive. It forces those backup quarterbacks we just talked about into obvious, predictable passing downs against a really complex pressure scheme. Early down stuffs will completely derail whatever offensive rhythm New Orleans hopes to build.
Section 5, Game States and Pace.
So how should we actually be watching this game? Forget the final score for a minute. Here is your analyst timeline. In the first quarter, you want to immediately chart the quarterback rotation and the personnel. Does Stafford get a heavily scripted opening drive, or are we jumping straight into the deep end with the reserves? If it's the reserves right out of the gate, you have to instantly discount that elite Rams offensive baseline we discussed earlier. Now, as we move through the first half, the number one signal to watch is pressure versus drop-back execution. If the Rams script a brilliant early game plan and jump out to a 7 to 10 point lead, expect the pace to slow way down into a heavier run-first possession game. If the Saints take the lead, context is everything. Is it built on clean pass protection and repeatable efficiency on early downs, or do they just get lucky with a short field off a fluky turnover? And then, once we hit the fourth quarter, throw the full game data out the window. Down the stretch, it is all about timeout management, the smoothness of the center quarterback exchange, and special teams execution.
To make it super simple, just follow these 3 live steps. Step 1, chart early down EPA. A clean, boring, positive 5-yard run on first and second down tells you way more about the actual quality of a unit than a broken play 70-yard touchdown pass against 4-string defensive backs who literally met each other yesterday. Step 2, monitor the blitz replacements. Watch the QBs right before the snap. Are they identifying where the extra rusher is coming from and adjusting? And step 3, evaluate the backup special teams. In a sloppy, low-possession game full of backups, a net punt advantage or a clean, penalty-free return past the 35-yard line is worth its weight in gold. It is disproportionately valuable.
And finally, Section 6, the final verdict.
All right, let's tie this whole deep dive together and give you a grounded, data-backed conclusion. We have to honor the rigorous data baselines we've established, while also fully acknowledging the wild uncertainty of August football. So, based on those verified numbers, our model estimates a home win probability at 58%, an away win at 40%, and a regulation tie sitting at 2%. Now, I need to be crystal clear here. These are purely descriptive analytical estimates. They are based on historical baselines and venue context, and they carry a massive amount of preseason uncertainty. This is strictly sports analysis and entertainment, guys. Definitely not financial or betting advice. Also, you might be wondering about that 2% tie probability. That's actually uniquely high because, under current NFL rules, preseason games do not have overtime. If they're tied after 4 quarters, that's the ballgame. The model gives a modest edge to LA based on their elite 2025 quality and being at home, but it heavily shrinks the expected margin of victory because we just don't know the workload distribution yet.
Which brings us to our final projected median score. Rams 20, Saints 17. We lean slightly toward the Rams simply because their complex defensive pressure package is highly capable of overwhelming inexperienced backup passers. But again, this entire outcome rests on the shoulders of the reserve units. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. When you're sitting on your couch watching this game, remember that the true victory for Sean McVay and Dennis Allen isn't going to be found by looking at the final score on the Jumbotron. The real game is found in evaluating rotational processing speed, checking the communication in the trenches, and seeing who maintains tackling discipline under the stadium lights. When the offensive scheme inevitably breaks down, who proves they actually belong on an NFL roster? Because at the end of the day, that is the real game being played.